Family, it's your favorite queer radio personality, Anna DeShawn, with our queer news for today. Now, I want to make you a promise. We will continue to bring you the latest in queer news, culture, and politics. 7 minutes a day, 5 days a week. So if you're digging our intersectional take on the daily, consider joining the QCrew. The QCrew is our monthly membership program we started to help us grow the podcast. With your help, we can bring you more stories celebrating our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and comrade communities. This month, we have our first QCrew exclusive interview. Y'all heard? It's an exclusive interview just for our QCrew community. I had the opportunity to interview Felicia D. Henderson. Now, if you don't know, let me tell you, she's a Black woman television producer, writer, and showrunner in Hollywood, whose latest project, First Kill, is currently on Netflix and blowing the numbers out the water. So if you want to watch the exclusive interview with Felicia D. Henderson, you got to join the QCrew. It starts as low as $5 a month. Now, you've shown your support by tuning into this episode, and you can show your curiosity by wanting to watch that Felicia D. Henderson interview by clicking the link in the show notes to learn more about the QCrew. Now for the news. BG has been wrongfully detained for 161 days, and there have been a few big developments, family. Yesterday, she testified on her own behalf. Secretary of State Blinken confirmed a trade is on the table, and Time magazine has put Brittney on the cover. Let's talk about all of it. Let's go.
You are now tuned in to higher frequencies. We do this frequently. Turn your radio station to E3 for that decency. Listen to great music and the latest movement. Safe listening for anyone that's tuned in. Who you waking up to? Anna DeShawn, QCrew and friends. It's that real talk. Online radio with the spins. You caught up in traffic, frustrated. Just check in with E3 to shift your vibrations and get elevated. That's queer radio done right. Choose to be yourself. That's the only way to live life, and that's how it's done here. Just know y'all tuned in to the greatest. Ain't no competition. We ain't worried about the other stations. Check.
For today, I want to give Brittney all of our time, as there were quite a few developments yesterday, and it's worth digging into. To set the stage, she walked into court with a black, long-sleeved Phoenix Mercury shirt on and was escorted in handcuffs to the defendant's cage. That's what they call it. It's not what I made up. They call it a defendant's cage. It looks like a long, narrow holding cell, and that's where she sits during her trial. Her lawyers sit right in front of her, and in front of her lawyers are members of the media who have been approved to be there snapping pictures and taking video before the hearing begins. It's during this time that she put up a transparent folder which had pictures of her family inside, a reminder of the people that love her that she can keep close. She needed it too, their strength, because yesterday she testified on her own behalf and provided lots of insight on her experience at the Moscow airport on that fateful February 17th. BG's defense has been underway for the last few weeks. They started with character witnesses from her basketball team, her Russian basketball club director, the team's head physician, and her teammate and captain all spoke about what Brittney means to their team. They all spoke positively about her impact personally and professionally. Next, her lawyers presented evidence that Brittney has a medical marijuana clearance from her attending physician due to a chronic injury. This permission was issued on behalf of the Arizona Department of Health. Her defense went on to submit tests from anti-doping checks, which didn't detect any prohibited substances in her system. This leads us to yesterday, where she testified on her own behalf. BG testified that at the Moscow airport, after inspectors found the cartridges, she was never read her rights, and she was mandated to sign documents that she couldn't read, and the translator couldn't translate fast enough. So she really didn't know what they meant. She said, "I remember one time there was a stack of papers that the translator needed to translate for me. He took a brief look and then said the exact words were, basically, you are guilty." Family, can you imagine being in that position? Could you imagine being held there, not being able to understand the language and not understanding what's going to happen next? It's really hard for me to wrap my head around it, you know? Now, prosecutors asked BG whether she admitted to the crime. This is a key factor used by Russian courts to determine leniency in sentencing. I mean, this is why she pled guilty early on in this trial in hopes the Russian court would take that into consideration when it came to sentencing. Let us not forget, she is facing up to 10 years in a Russian prison. Those are 10 very real years in a Russian prison, okay? So the prosecutors asked whether she admitted to the crime. BG said, "As they ended up in my bags by accident, I take responsibility, but I did not intend to smuggle or plan to smuggle banned substances to Russia," she said. Griner testified that a doctor had prescribed the cannabis oil to treat an inflammation that resulted from sports injuries. She said many athletes use it. She went on to say, "I had no intention to break the law. I rushed, packing, and stressed packed. I was in a huge hurry." Now, family, it's also come to light that during the same time, she was recovering from COVID-19 as well. The plot just gets thicker and thicker. Now, her defense team believes the trial will be over by the beginning of August, which leads me to talk about Secretary of State Blinken's comments yesterday. Let's take a listen.
In the coming days, I expect to speak with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov for the first time since the war began. I plan to raise an issue that's a top priority for us: the release of Americans Paul Whelan and Brittney Griner, who've been wrongfully detained and must be allowed to come home. We put a substantial proposal on the table weeks ago to facilitate their release. Our governments have communicated repeatedly and directly on that proposal. And I'll use the conversation to follow up personally and, I hope, move us toward a resolution.
Now, this is the very first time Secretary of State Blinken has actually spoken Brittney's name. He's answered questions in the past, of course, but has been playing this pretty close to the vest. Well, not anymore. We know that a swap for BG and Paul Whelan cannot happen until BG's trial is complete, until there is a conviction, which is just a foregone conclusion at this point. We're all just waiting for the trial to end and for a sentence to be handed down. For this swap, I've shared in the past about Victor Bout, the merchant of death, who has been at the center of the conversation around a swap. Russia has wanted him for years, and in this moment, they have a lot of leverage because we are looking to get two people back home to their families. You may not know a lot about Paul Whelan, but essentially, he's a U.S. citizen, former Marine, and businessman who was arrested in Moscow in December of 2018. He was found guilty of espionage after a secret trial with secret evidence and sentenced to 16 years in a hard labor prison camp. He vehemently denies all of the charges against him, and his family has been trying to get him back home. But he doesn't have the notoriety of a Brittney Griner, so maybe it can happen now. The U.S. has named him as wrongfully detained as well. So as we wait to see how all of this unfolds, we will continue to share BG's story. We will continue to push to get her home. She doesn't deserve what's happening to her, period. And I don't need to read off her resume. Y'all know her credits, which none bigger than her being an Olympian. I will say, we can see the media coverage picking up as well, which is evidenced by the latest Time magazine cover that just dropped, which features artwork by Lorna Simpson. When you see it, you'll be taken aback a bit because it's very abstract. But once I learned about Lorna's work, I got it. And I want to end with a word from her on its meaning. She said, "For me, the strong impression of this image of Griner is not only what could be interpreted as the solemnity of her expression, but also the symmetry of the star tattoos on her shoulders. The inversion of the illustration is a way of bringing into focus how much of her life has been upended, the urgency of her release and safe return to the U.S., and the preciousness of time that is passing. Family, because time is a commodity we can never get back. We are BG. Till tomorrow, peace." If you enjoyed what you hear, rate and review us inside your favorite podcasting app. This podcast is a production of E3 Radio, your #1 queer radio station playing queer music and reporting on queer news in high rotation.